All right, I think we are live and ready to go.
Yes, we are. I'm just going to throw across on the live stream here. So anyone that's on the Adamson live stream, we're just going to jump straight into it. All right, I'm going to hand over to Max. Max, this is all you.
Oh, I get to do my own intro, I see. All right, welcome everybody. This is going to be a short talk this morning with a rad mix of sales representatives, system engineers, and front of house and monitor mixers. We're on the Adamson channel today. Thank you so much to Adamson for hosting us. They make amazing PAs. If you've never had the chance to mix on them, I hope you do get the chance after quarantine. I have 6 amazing guests with me today from literally all over the world. So before we get started, I'd like to remind everybody to be polite on the live stream questions and with each other. If you have any questions for us during the event, you can either ask on the Adamson webinar link. We're also live streaming to Facebook, and Carrie Keys from the Soundgirls is moderating that, so she will be sending me questions. If you have any questions to ask us, please feel free to send them. So before we get started with the more technical questions, I'd love to know a little bit about each and every one of you. Can you tell me a bit about yourself and how you got into audio? I'm going to start with Freyja.
Hi, so my name is Freyja Lawson. I am a freelance audio technician and engineer. I'm currently based in London. So, how did I get into audio? I think from doing a degree in audio and music production. I graduated, luckily for me, in 2012 when the Olympics were in London, and was part of a volunteer scheme to go ahead and be an audio assistant for some of the venues and some of the events that they had on, and kind of ended up working with a massive team from a huge PA company in Britain, and they took me on afterwards, and the rest is history.
What have you been working on in the past few years?
So I've kind of been working on quite a few different things. When I first started out, I decided I wanted to be a front of house engineer, and quickly decided that really wasn't for me, and got quite fascinated with the world of system engineering. So from the first, couple of years of my career, I was very much into system teching. I still am absolutely, completely all about it. I've been lucky enough to have some amazing opportunities. One of my first system engineer gigs was David Gilmour in Pompeii, which I don't think I'm ever going to top. So I think I might just quit around my head. But as of late, I've also been monitor teching for quite a few people, from Deftones to James Morrison. And I've just landed a gig with an incredible artist and his band, Muramasa. And before all of this lockdown went crazy, we were in the middle of a tour. So hopefully when it's back up and running, we'll be out again. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Awesome. Rena, how did you get into audio?
I got into audio 18 years ago, sort of by accident. I was studying to be a dancer and got injured and transitioned into a course at a recording studio. So I spent the first 5 years of my career in a recording studio, and then transitioned into mixing sound for musicals, doing front of house, and eventually ended up working for a sound company, and gradually, after some venue gigs and a variety of different things, ended up on the road as a front of house and tour manager. So maybe the biggest fault or mistake I've made in my career is that I've done a little bit of everything and not really chosen one specific discipline. I spent last year doing front of house, tour management, monitors, and production coordination. And so, I kind of do all of these things, and this time off is making me realize maybe it's time for me to focus, choose to be a front of house and just do that, or focus on my recording studio so there's no more touring or whatever. But that's me.
What were you doing before the pandemic hit?
Before the pandemic hit, I actually had just finished a tour 2 days before and was planning to have the month of March off already. And then was flexible for April, was negotiating 3 or 4 different things for April, was officially booked for something that began in August and was going to go for the rest of the year. And that just got moved to 2021. And so, so now I'm just waiting.
I guess as we all are. Jade, what's your story?
Yeah, so I got into audio well over a decade ago. Like most people, I kind of started out in the studio side of things, but I did get a degree in Tennessee. I went to Middle Tennessee State and studied production technology within recording from around like 2004 to 2008. And then kind of tried my way in like as many crappy internships as I could handle around Nashville, and then kind of decided that the Nashville scene wasn't really for me. I moved to New York because I also was playing in bands at the time. And I guess that is kind of the obvious thing that got me to audio. But yeah, throughout playing in bands and different spaces, you kind of just end up like having to run your own sounds sometimes. And so I was kind of going through the studio thing in New York. I interned at the Magic Shop, one of the last independent studios. And then from that, I managed to get a job at a mastering studio called Sterling Sound. So I was there for a handful of years. Then by that time, I was still playing in bands and I just really felt like the live area really calling my name. I just really wanted to be on tour. I didn't want to be inside seeing the same people every day. So I left Sterling Sound and then started running sound at like a local Brooklyn music venue called Silent Barn. And that's kind of really where I got into the front of house side of things. From there, it was just kind of how it goes for a lot of people, like it's a networking thing, meeting other musicians and a lot of indie bands that suddenly are kind of breaking out. Suddenly they have a budget for front of house and suddenly, oh yeah, we know someone, Jade. And so, you know, I got lucky. I got taken on the road and got kind of cut my teeth that way. The whole band tour thing, living on floors, you know, you're the front of house monitor, backline, blah, blah, blah. And then from there it kind of snowballed. You know, when I got back to New York, I would work in, you know, smaller venues, you know, learning more until those became bigger venues and until the bands became kind of bigger bands. And then suddenly it was, you know, this is what I'm doing for most of my life now.
And what was keeping you busy before COVID?
I was just kind of between tours. Actually, before I learned that I wouldn't be doing a tour the day before we were supposed to fly, because I was going to be with Bikini Kill. We were doing a Pacific Northwest tour, and that was kind of where things really like kind of started in the U.S. Spreading. So I was about to do that, but yeah, now I'm suddenly living in this strange place in Maine I've never been to.
Hey, as long as you're safe. Victoria, tell us about yourself.
Well, I got started in audio because my dad is a hobby musician, and so I grew up around it. He was really into the punk scene in Ohio. That's where I grew up. And so just being around him and his friends made me decide that I wanted to go to school for this. So I did a 4-year program. And when I got there, I wanted to be a studio engineer. And I was kind of on that track for like a year and decided that that wasn't for me and that I liked live sound better. So I got a couple jobs in smaller format venues in Columbus, Ohio. And then I kind of like rode that wave like through college, finished college, didn't really do a whole lot of touring, mostly like hometown venue stuff. And then I took kind of a leap and I moved into graphic design and moved to Vancouver, British Columbia and lived there for a little while. And then when my visa was going to expire, I was like, I don't really like doing this. So I left and moved to Austin, Texas, which is where I am now. And from there, I moved into production. So I started working for a smaller regional production house. Really started honing in my skills on what it is to work in systems specifically, but as it applies to, you know, festival builds, rental builds for venues that rent PAs and systems. And then decided to go full-time freelance, which was the best decision that I made for that time period. Started working for a larger company here in Austin. And then I went on the road for a while with a country artist as front of house and production manager. And from there, I got offered a job with Sound Image in California. And since then, I've kind of just been doing touring systems and PA teching. And then I guess right before this, I was getting ready to prep South by. And South by was, as you guys know, kind of one of the like first big ones to just cancel. And so I was kind of in the midst of my first gig was with Facebook. So they canceled. Preliminarily, they said, you know, we're not bringing anybody in our building. And I was like, oh crap. I was like, here we go. And everything just kind of snowballed down from there. But yeah, before that, I was just out with Sound Image for most of last year. And now I'm kind of moving into the education sector for live sound, trying to adapt to the mess that is COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, it sounds like you're staying busy.
I'm trying.
We're all trying. Meegan, can you give us your story?
Yeah, I came up as a musician, and I went to California Institute of the Arts to study music composition, and kind of realized that I wasn't going to make any money doing it. And I had spent a long time as like in my early teens, volunteering for summer stock theater. It was something I always really loved, the technical aspect of theater and everything. And most of my friends were in the tech department at Cal Arts, so I did a double major and got a theatrical sound design degree. And I was really lucky. Started working my junior year of college in the industry here as a stagehand, and just kind of stayed. And I had student loans, and knew I was into doing the live thing. That was the great thing about going to college, was being able to experiment and see, like, did I like doing recorded audio? Did I like doing live audio? I think being a musician, it definitely afforded me some of the understanding of the difference between the two. And I really appreciated doing the live aspect of things. So I was right out of college. That was my goal. I did some band touring. I did some Weekend Warrior stuff. And then in '97 was my first like big, bus and truck tour. I did Lollapalooza. When it was the last year, it was actually a tour and not a one-off in Chicago. At that point, I'd started working for Delicate Productions. They're a regional audio company here in California. I worked for them for almost 19 years, and I needed a change of pace and started looking for other work to do and more places to kind of grow and spread my wings, and interviewed with a bunch of places and landed at 8 Day Sound, and I've started their Los Angeles branch here. We're a global company. This is the 4th office that's open. We have offices in Ohio, the UK, Australia, and here in LA. Before COVID, I was gearing up for what was going to be an extremely busy time period, and kind of going through the mental preparations for that kind of high level of stress and everything. And when it all came to a grinding halt, I kind of spun around in circles for a few weeks. But now I'm just trying to keep up with what some of my more unique clients are trying to do, kind of unique events, drive-in stuff, live streaming. So that's kind of my story right now.
Awesome. It's good you're keeping busy. Ayumi, you're up all the way from Japan, where it's past midnight.
It's around 12:16 midnight. So how I got into audio, a bunch of my friends would perform in bands, but I was more drawn to the mixing side rather than performing myself. And I started working in local venues when I was around high school. And after I graduated university, I worked as a technician and mixer front of house for a branch of Brunet in Japan. And after that, I freelanced for some companies. And around 5 or 6 years ago, I came across the Green Book by Bob McCarthy. And I think it's fair to say that around those times, the role of system engineer was not so well established in Japan, like unless you worked for a mega company. So, and that really explained a lot of the questions I had. And I think it was around 2017, summer, our Japanese distributor called me up and said, there's a job opening at Adamson, and if you're willing to travel a lot and tune a PA rig, yeah, that's for you. And yeah, so that's me.
What were you working on before the pandemic hit?
I was traveling around 3 to 3 weeks per month, all across Asia. We would do like festivals, just some shows or like demos. So it's been pretty busy until like the 1st of March. And I think Java Jazz, we did have a festival in Jakarta. I think that was the last gig I did.
Okay. You've been doing training online, right? Ever since?
Yeah, for the past 2 to 3 months. Yeah, we've been doing a Blueprint online certification training. We've done one for Australia, India, quite a few countries so far.
That's awesome. So let's get started on these questions. I'm going to throw this one to Meegan because you work in sales, but can you explain the festival advance process? How do festivals pick which PA system they're going to use?
Gosh, there's a lot of factors there. I think focal point is the style of festival that it is. So if you're doing a hip hop festival or a rock show or, you know, electronic dance music, we're all going to kind of approach those mediums a little bit differently. For a vendor, a lot of the time it has to do with our inventory availability. If we're, you know, 8th Day, we obviously stock Adamson PAs, and we have other manufacturers' PAs as well. Really taking a look at who's taking what on tour, who is, you know, what's available for what markets. The other factor is really demand. If we're seeing a headliner that is commonly on Adamson PAs, we're probably going to try to accommodate that. So yeah, it's a lot, and there's a lot of potential for it to change as we get into it, because we have things confirmed. Obviously, as a vendor, we try and put our gear out for the longest period of time. So sometimes that means that we commit to using one product for a string of festivals. So if we know that we've got 30 festivals between May and September, we're going to commit to probably using the same systems for those shows, just for sake of prep and ease and the crew. Sometimes the gear stays on a truck and rolls to another festival, out of one and into another. So these are all kind of common factors that contribute to the, you know, at least the decision on what PA, and to a degree on what consoles we use. Sometimes it has to do with if we've got a festival that we've done for a very long time. I've done a lot of festivals here in the Los Angeles area for, you know, a long time. How we evolve the choosing of the gear and grow and develop, learn from mistakes, learn from issues, learn from pitfalls. When I worked at Delicate, we had a PA system that was a little bit more complex. was a very system engineer driven system, meaning that it was complicated and it could be installed poorly and not sound great. But if your system engineer was on point and knew what they were doing, and were sensitive to the nuances of it, it was an amazing product. But not every engineer really appreciates it. There are some, you know, very popular PAs that engineers are very comfortable with. They kind of know how that PA is going to act. And so when they roll into a festival and they see an Adamson rig, they're like, oh, okay, I know what this does. And I know what my good starting points are. I think for us as a vendor, we try and at least give the engineers a good starting point.
Okay, so it's a really complex.
Yeah, I wish I could say it's because of this, but it's not. It's so much more than I can ever define. And sometimes it's very headliner driven on these festivals. They will make it part of their deal, you know, with the festival, is that they have to have a particular brand of PA. And then that drives, in turn, drives what vendor ends up doing it, because not all of us carry every type of PA that exists. So we all kind of have our product lines that we sell, obviously, and it really depends on, you know, a lot of the time the headliner will also push for their vendor, because they know that they're going to get their PA the way they're used to having it deployed. You know, lots of companies can have the same PA, but those PAs can all sound different. We can choose a venue and have 3 different PA companies come in with the same PA, but 3 different system engineers with 3 different mentalities, and they can all sound totally different, but it's still all Adamson.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors, unfortunately. I wish it was an easy answer.
No, and I mean, that segues nicely really into the next question. I was wondering, is system tuning for a festival stage, where you have multiple acts of different genres, like say something like Coachella, different than for a one artist show in an arena or a theater? I'm going to throw that to my system engineers.
I'll try that one. I have never been a system engineer for Coachella. It's a dream, but you know, one day. I would say that your job then as a system engineer is to hand over the blankest of blank canvases to any front of house engineer. You need to make that system work as something for them to build on, not just for something, you know, that relates to one artist. So for instance, if you know that you're going to have a hip hop act headlining, it doesn't necessarily mean that you tune it purely to hip hop. You still have other bands, you still have other artists there. I mean, obviously, if it's like a rock festival, that kind of thing, you might want to color it in some ways, but that isn't your job. I don't think, as a system engineer, is to not color a system. It's literally, like I said, to give the front of house engineer a blank canvas to work from. Yeah, that's what I think.
No, I would mostly agree with that. I think that you know, our job is to make sure that everything is deployed for coverage and for optimization in that way. A lot of times, and in a festival setting, I think that because there are so many different engineers and sometimes different control packages coming in and out, that leaving it up to a front of house engineer, you know, to figure out what they want to do with the PA when it's their turn, as far as coloring, as far as EQ, they can do that from their side, but we also, you know, have to be more than willing to accommodate, you know, oh, I would like to see what you've done already. If you have, you know, in Lake, I would like to see what your processing is on your amps already. Are you tilting anything? Are you, you know, what have you done? And so having kind of a good idea of what kind of festival it is, what your coverage is, what your boxes are, how they're deployed, and then being able to communicate that, you know, in technical terms and in kind of less technical terms to people who are less systems engineers and more mix engineers is important when you're systems for a festival where you have all different kinds of people, because you'll have people that are mixing front of house, but they're systems people too. You'll have people that are just really into the sound painting part of mixing and less technical. And so I think that, you know, when you're approaching your system from a systems perspective, especially in a setting where you're going to have a lot of different ears, a lot of different controls, that it's good to be, you know, how do I say this?
Transparent.
Yeah, transparent and easy to explain and show what you've done so that they can manipulate based on what you've already done for your part.
Yeah, I agree, and I'd add to that as well. Like, your communication in that is also key. Like you said, being able to explain what you've done and being transparent and forthcoming with your like file or the processing that you've done is really important. Because if you're not, then your communication kind of goes downhill and you end up in a strange environment, which no one really wants. So yeah, I'm with you.
Cool. Ayumi and I were talking about this a little bit before, and she was wondering for other system engineers and to some extent front of house, because I know some of us use Smart. What is your reference when you tune the PA? What is your approach to target curves, smart traces, your ears?
There's a lot of different you know, schools of thought on this, and I think that you know, working on I guess let's like kind of narrow the question a little bit, because do you want to specifically stick to like in a large format PA and then like an outdoor festival setting, or
yeah,
just in general?
Let's stick with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think it depends. I mean, I do like to look at the squiggly lines. I like to look at Smart. I like to see what's going on with a system from reference. And I think, though, at the end of the day, one of the best pieces of advice that anybody's ever given me is to always trust your ears. And so for me, like, this is, oh man, I'm trying to like think of how I can narrow this down, because I do a little bit of both. You know, I use Smart as a tool. I like to, if I can and I have access to them, use multiple mics and kind of try to average what I'm seeing in Smart in order to look at how the system's responding to the environment that it's in. So this is, you know, purely just trying to get whatever target curve you're going for here. Not speaking on time or anything, but it is the more reference points that you can have sometimes will convolute what you're trying to get to. So I would say that I would work with no more than 3 reference microphones in that situation, especially if there's different axes, you know, different angles, different planes. Yeah, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. Anybody else care to chip in on this?
I think technology is a good.
Was the question?
Oh,
sorry. Was the question how many mics measure?
It was more for system engineers, like what do they use when they're tuning and they're setting up a PA? Ayumi and I were talking about it. What is their reference, you know, like their approach to target curves, smart traces, their ears. And Ayumi, if you want to hop in on that at some point too.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick that I think that technology has come leaps and bounds, especially since I started in the industry, and certainly in the past 10 years, we've come a long way. I remember some of the earlier versions of Smart, you know, we use them to do delay times and everything, but a lot of the time when it came to the tuning, we were kind of using it for the more screaming feedback, sort of, you know, frequency identification kind of stuff. But now that's a really good starting point. But ultimately, you're not going to have a computer listening to your show. You have people listening to your show. And so you need to use your ears. And the best system engineers that, you know, work for us, that I've worked with over the years, they'll use every bit of technology they can to get to a certain point. But once they reach that certain point, it's all goes to the organic. It all goes to that listening. And I think that that's something you can never, ever, doesn't matter how great technology gets, you'll never stop using your ears as the final say in how something sounds.
That is so true. Just to chip in real quick, I think my signal bugged out for a second. But Meegan's right. Like that, I have definitely, because everything in time alignment, everything in tuning a system, it's all somewhat of a compromise technologically. Like you're really only time aligning to one point in time and space. And so sometimes, you know, you might say like, you know, I need to add, you know, this much delay to this circuit or this speaker, and then you walk up to like the pit, like if you're listening to your front fills, and then your down fills, and you walk up to the pit and you're like, oh, it doesn't sound right, you know, and even though like I'm seeing, you know, on my smart screen, like, oh, like, you know, something, it looks like it's lining up here, you know, everything is a compromise. And so, you know, maybe you go down and you say that doesn't sound right, and so you back off whatever you've done, or you add a little bit to what you've done, and then you're like, oh, okay, all right. You know, and again, all of it is a compromise, because you want to try, the goal is to provide the same show to as many people as you can in your audience space. You want to try to get them, you know, the same quality, the same show. But at the end of the day, using your ears after, like Meegan said, you've exhausted, you know, your technology, you'll use every bit that you have that's available to you. Trusting what you're hearing and your expertise is, you know, kind of the end game at the end of the day.
That's what you get paid for, right?
Okay. I'm going to throw this one to the front of house engineers in the bunch. What is your process when you arrive at a festival at front of house? Do you speak with the system tech, or do you prefer just kind of go ahead on the console? Do they say hi to you? You know, what's your experience been like?
I absolutely approach the system tech before doing anything else, if possible. You know, that's the place to start, because that is what introduces you to what you're going to be experiencing. Like I, as a front of house mixer, I am very much the sound painting person that Victoria mentioned, but I'm also technical minded. Like I've done the Meyer sound system design and implementation course, and I've done smart training, and so I have an awareness of what all the technical stuff is, and I have that in my back pocket. But I want to be able to just like be in the zone and hear the sound and subconsciously manipulate the equipment. And the only way to get to know what the zone is to communicate well with the system tech. And I appreciated Victoria saying being transparent and allowing them to look at your files and your settings, because I love to look at it, even if I don't understand everything they've done or have time to absorb it all. I just like to have a vague idea of, okay, you've needed to do this, you've needed to do that. It helps me know where things are in the space, and it's totally necessary. That's the very first thing I do, yeah.
Jade, you want to add to that?
Definitely check in with systems engineer. I also want to make a point that I've been in a lot of situations at festivals where like that could be somebody else with like a different name. The stage that you're on could have like a chief engineer, front of house engineer, that they're also responsible for that, depending on, you know, what your scenario is. Also, it's kind of dropping in, you know, into like the chaos, you know. It's kind of a like, they want to get you in, get you out kind of thing. So, but a lot of times like the system is not there at your site, at your stage when you need them. But regardless of that, I do try to talk to somebody that's knowledgeable enough to explain what's going on. Similar to Rena, I tend to stay out of that stuff, especially with festivals, and I tend to trust them with with my outputs. Like I'm gonna just deliver. I basically say what I've got on my file in terms of outputs. Like here I've got, or I'll even ask them like, what do you need from me? But a lot of it is going into like preparing your show file so that it's just ready to go for any scenario. Maybe they need to send it to broadcast, or, you know, that tower, this tower. So it's good to just get that file to them in advance if you can. Just asking, and asking to look at the file is good, because, you know, maybe there's always something like maybe I didn't change from my last show that I forgot, such as, you know, maybe my matrix sending my left right out at like way lower than I want it to be. And yeah, Meegan brought up a really good point too, where like just because you see this brand of PA that maybe you've mixed on a million times, depending on who set it up, you know, it could be different. Depending on what country you're in, it could be outputting like a drastically different power than you're used to. I did, I think, a festival in Chile. It was like a Meyer system, and that I feel like was the only time I really had to kind of play detective about what was going on and get the systems engineer more involved. But, you know, you just be cool about it. Like, you're not trying to, it's not about, there's no, to me, I don't look at it as a versus, you know, it's like, we're just trying to have a good gig. You fill me in on your ends and I'll fill you in what I've got or what we're trying to achieve, and let's see if we can make it happen. Ideally, you have enough time for that. But I will say a lot of times I've been in festival scenarios where you're just like, I just want my inputs patched. I want them to come through the PA. If I can get those things happening, then it's
I think we lost you for a second here. That kind of segues to my next question though, like, is the front of house mixer and system engineer relationship kind of adversarial? Is it like a complementary relationship? You know, how do you work with one another?
I hope it's not adversarial ever.
Oh, please don't let it ever be.
like more of a
I don't think I've ever had an experience where it was adversarial either. A lot of competition, or I've felt a lot of animosity with venue techs in smaller capacity venues on tour, a lot. And they, in those situations, are the system tech, or sometimes there's no system tech. You're just liaising with this front of house guy who thinks you're an idiot, and that's a pain in the ass. But once you're dealing with a large festival, we're dealing with professionals. I've never encountered a large festival where the house person, at least I don't think, in my memory, I have a tendency to only remember things a good way, but I don't think I've ever encountered animosity or an adversarial relationship with the system tech at a large professional installation.
Ayumi, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sorry, everyone. My connection's been terrible. Like, I had to drop out a few times. For me, I've never encountered much animosity on site. It's let's see. Yeah, as long as we get the system up and running, I usually do show support for countries in Asia, and because when the front of house engineer comes comes on site, usually there's only like a handful of engineers that he could talk to. So I try to like bridge everything. I try to bridge the communication for the touring FOH to the local team, and so it's usually they're usually pretty friendly and quite cooperative.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say for us, when we choose system techs to do our festivals, we're very mindful of who we're sending. These are long, hard days of work for an audio crew. Festivals are no joke, especially when we're talking anything more than 5 bands. Even 5 bands is a lot, but you start getting up into the 6, 7, 10, 12 bands on a stage in a day. Having a system tech that can at least, when band number 3 of the day, they didn't have a sound check and that engineer rolls up, you know, how accommodating can that person be and still really accomplish their job, make the engineer feel welcome and at least looked after. But you're 3 of 12 or you're 3 of 9, like, and we've likely already dealt with headliner and headliner's needs or demands to alter things, like now they have a thrust and we have to move the subs, or, you know, again, the compromise factor we've all kind of brought up. But ultimately, I think that it's the system engineer's job to service and to take care of the front of house engineers that are coming in. And if you're gonna start your day off being adversarial, if you're working for a vendor, that vendor is really gonna take a step backwards and see, like, maybe you're not the best person to be, because you, in many ways, you are the ambassador of how that show is gonna go for that engineer that day. You know, I catch a lot of people on the festivals I do. When I'm on site, I manage to kind of get everybody on stage or meet people or have a chance to talk. But in some cases, that front of house engineer beelines the front of house and talks to that system engineer. And I say this a lot. It's not your show. It's not my show. It's all of our show. Every band that's there, lighting crew, video crew, audio crew, all of us together, making a show for these people that have likely paid a lot of money and have a very special experience planned to come and see it. So I think it's our responsibility to all get along and do the best that we can in every way.
I was going to add to that yeah, you know, my approach, whether I'm on the road or doing, you know, a festival or just a one-off show, is that we are all one team with one goal. And without everybody working together and, you know, staying on task, which the task is to make the show happen, you know, we have to work together. And so, like, as a systems person, it is of utmost importance to me to extend a friendly hand no matter what, first thing, and to keep that level-headedness and that friendliness going. And in my personal experience, both on the road and on one-offs and festivals, my best days are days where people have, you know, the positive mental attitude and being kind to people. And you know, not all, sometimes you can't always accommodate everybody. You're not going to always be able to give them everything that they want, but offering them alternatives or still being kind when doing so and being level-headed goes such a long way. And people remember you for that and they respond better to that. You don't have to come in first thing, you know, with anger and demands. You can do it being kind and being nice and treating people like they're all part of the one team, the one show. And I think that's such an important thing to remember, especially as the systems person, because like Meegan said, like, you're the ambassador, you know, you're the connection point. So I just, you know, I always feel like it's important to mention that you can accomplish by being kind.
Jade?
Yeah, for sure. I loved what you just said about being an ambassador, because it's all about just being, you want people to be able to approach you so that they can help you when you need it. When I say people, I mean, I'm talking about festival crew workers and anybody working a festival. One thing that I always do when I'm on stage and I get to a festival is I make a point to meet the patch person, introduce myself, know their name. Because if one of my input's wrong, I'm like, where's, blah, blah, blah. Like, but also just, I want them to know, like, I see you and, I'm going to be cool to you if you help get our patch right, because it's very easy for people, especially kind of lower on the totem pole, so to speak, job wise, to kind of check out. But if you're talking to them, if you're friendly, you might be the first person that was friendly to them, like that whole weekend. Security people too always say hi with a smile. How's your day going? Like that's kind of also because I want them to not stop me when I'm trying to get back and forth from front of house. But that's a really good point. For sure, be a people person, be kind, bring in extra waters to front of house when you go back there. Make sure we're all taken care of.
Cool. For the system engineers, I know some of you touched on this a little bit already, but how do you accommodate a touring front of house engineer at a festival? Do you check in with them right away? What happens if there's no sound check for their artist?
I would say yes. It's as Meegan and Victoria said, it's your job. If you're the system engineer for a festival, it's your job to introduce yourself to any guest, front of house engineers that you have, because at the end of the day, like Meegan said, you are the ambassador for that company that you're working for, and also for yourself. Some people I know have got tours, at long-running tours and gigs, purely from being that one person who was nice, who was polite, and who was helpful to a touring engineer when they came through a festival. And there's no price on manners. So yeah, you should be doing that. And again, you should go as far as you can within your means to accommodate them. Again, it's not just their show, but at that moment in time, it's going to be their band on the stage, and kind of what they say goes within reason. If you can accommodate them in any way that you can, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable and you're going to have a better day. Yeah, like Jade said, bring them some water, make them a cup of tea. It's kind of the first thing I do is like, do you want tea or coffee kind of thing, which sounds really lame, but actually it kind of helps because it eases everybody into it and you build up a nice rapport, and then they feel comfortable coming to you as well. That's an important thing, because I think some of the conversations I've had recently with people, like we've been discussing like, oh, people can be a bit funny about their lake files or their show files or anything like that, and it's like it breaks that barrier down, and that's really important, because if you don't communicate about that kind of thing, then you're just bouncing secrets off of each other, and it's just not helpful. Yeah, give them what they need as much as you can, and be kind, because also if they're touring, they might have it might be in that rough, weird week 3 phase where you kind of just hate everything for 5 minutes and then you're okay. You know what I mean? And you don't know. They could have had a really rough night. They could have not had any sleep. All they need is for someone to be nice and just hand them coffee with no questions. Like, just be that person.
Ayumi, do you have any thoughts?
Just like everyone else has said, I'd always introduce myself, go up to them and say hi, and I try to keep an eye out for anything that they need, like even if it's not audio related, because I know like who to talk to, like in terms of like the local team. And yeah, so just
If there's no sound check, do you have like different profiles on your lake? Like, do you check out the artist? How do you accommodate them?
When we have multiple artists, just in terms of workflow, I'd have like multiple different lake EQ layers, and just comes down to that 5 minutes before they actually start the performance. I'd try to like ask what they need, and just try to communicate during the show. There's just for little things.
From the technical standpoint of that too, having the multiple EQ layers if you're using Lake for your system is very good for that situation. I would do, just to reinforce that, I would do the same thing. So then, you're not, if you've already done sound checks, then you've already manipulated your system. And so you want to save those settings and those manipulations for the people who sound checked with them. And then you can kind of make minor tweaks and adjustments in layers in other places than throughout the day. And that feeds into, being kind and accommodating and doing that. I mean, that's part of your job. You don't have to be like, oh, I'm going to create, 6 layers so that we can, do this. Like, or you could be the person that's just like, oh, nope, this is just the PA, EQ, for the other bands who don't sound check. But it's not that hard to do that, and going above and beyond, or really just doing your job to accommodate, especially bands and engineers that don't have sound checks. Those little things, again, will go a long way.
Yeah, cool, thanks. I mean, this is for everybody, but system engineers, do you prefer to do the tuning on the lake, or are you into the front of house mixers doing their tweaks on the console? And then for my front of house mixers, would you rather ask the system engineer to do the processing directly, or do you throw like parametrics to 31 bands on your file and just get going there?
I'll take this one because I kind of have a funny answer, because if you asked me this like maybe a few years ago, I would have had a really different answer. But one mistake I see a lot of front of house people making is that I used to do this a lot, is kind of thinking that like we have to tailor our outputs like as best as we can and then hand them over. But a lot of times what can happen if you decide that it's better that you have all that control, especially with something as simple as, I'm going to throw like a 24 dB octave high pass or low pass filter like on my sub output, and like a high pass, on my left, right. You're already messing with the system engineers work just by doing that. So I would just say I tend to be very careful and err on the side of safety with what I'm delivering and just kind of having more of an understanding of what's happening to this mix after it comes out of my console, and just kind of taking more time to think about that. Yeah.
To further that, I totally agree that we should be doing less to our matrixed outputs than I think historically front of house people have done, or what I used to do in the past. I think system teching has really come a long way in the last 10 years as far as the efficiency and the perfection. We didn't used to have, or at least my experience, I didn't encounter system engineers like you, people who were so hands-on and informative and whatever. And so there was a lot more manipulation in the past from the front of house desk. But now I think as little as possible, I still have it available to me on all my matrices if I need to grab it or do it. It's just not engaged. But if something's happening and I need to manipulate there, I just know that I have it in my chain. And I still typically do mix with an EQ on my master always, because that's a way that I blend my front of house mix. That's just part of my mix, is EQ and compression on my main bus. And, depending on my matrices, maybe in some other places for different color as well. But that's an artistic choice essentially. So yeah, leave it up to the system tech as much as possible and communicate with them if you think there's a problem. That's your EQ right there, as your communication.
Yeah, and just Max, to like really answer your question, I would say yes, I would prefer to do all of my EQing on the lake or whatever my DSP is. It's just better. If I have the time and if it's available to me, then definitely I will use that. If I don't have the time, if it's not available, if this is text putting out a fire, I don't know where the tablet is, yeah, I'm definitely going to use my own outboard parametrics. Any
of my system folk want to jump in, or that sounds pretty good to you?
just real quick, I don't know. I think I would be quite traditional in that sense. If I'm being a system engineer, I wouldn't necessarily want to take over the front of house person's desk, unless of course they had a really big issue. Like I had an experience once where I was a front of house tech for an engineer, going around doing a small tour of the UK, and we came to one venue, and I knew the system engineer, and I was questioning myself whether or not I was allowed to question what he'd done to the system. And I was really lucky because a friend of mine, a local, who was like local to the venue, had come down anyway, just because he knew us all and he wanted to check out the gig. And he was, he's an incredible system engineer. So I felt comfortable going to him and asking him this question. And I'm like, look, I don't get what this guy is doing to this system. And he's like, you can ask, you're allowed to ask. That's what, going back to what we were saying before, we hadn't had that chat. I knew the guy, but whatever. And I did question it. And my engineer was like, oh, did you fix the PA? And I was like, yeah, I did actually. But, I did it away from his console. He's mixing or he's sound checking. I don't want to get in there and be like, oh, I can totally fix this. Like I would keep them quite separate. But I have also been on that same gig, he's like, right, okay, so lake file for today, blah, 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 here we go. He just wants to see, again, what we're doing, what's been done. But, he doesn't need to see the AMP program or anything like that. He just wants to know what we've done to it. So.
To be clear, I wasn't suggesting that the system tech should touch my desk or my outputs. Yeah, no. What I mean is like my desk would be contained, my outputs would be, and then I would send various outputs to the system tech.
I wouldn't have had him cut 2K out of this just because this guy hadn't done it through the system. I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because to go back to the scenario of are you support or are you headliner, I have been in situations where we have been headliner, and it, so then you will typically get the chance to come there in the morning when the PA's being flown, which I always do. I always want to be there because mostly it's not that I have all the technical knowledge per se of like, angle it that way, do it this way. It's just that I just want to be there just so that my presence is there, and so that I know they see me and like, okay, we're holding each other accountable now. Like I care about how this is done. And I've definitely like sat there, looking like, a schmuck, not doing anything, just to watch and like make notes. And maybe I'll see like, okay, maybe they're done. But I notice something as simple as like an angle looks off to me. Like at least I can go and say like, hey man, like maybe you're not done or whatever. Like but should this really be like that? And there's been times when, my system tech's been like, oh yeah, let me make sure like my guy gets that. Like it's cool. And so anyway, it's definitely not about, breathing down someone's neck, but the checking in, the showing up when they're flying it, if you can, just says like, hey, I care about how this is done. I want, let me know what you need from me. If you have any questions, a lot of times like, no, we got it. So yeah, it can really vary.
So it looks like we've lost Max.
Oh, no.
But it's kind of a good time, actually. I'm going to jump in. I'd actually just texted her a couple of these. We had a couple of questions that came in, and these are great festival questions because I've asked this in a couple of previous interviews. What for the front of house engineers interfacing with the system engineers, what are you typically feeding? Are you just doing a left-right, or are you doing a left-right sub? How do you approach that interchange between something that's coming with you every day as far as a console or a mix on a particular show file to any given system? Like how many of you are mixing subs on AUX? How many of you just providing left to right or on matrices?
For me personally, I am prepared to do it. Most of the time I'm prepared to do it almost any way. My mixes are set up such that I can matrix out in a variety ways. And then I will liaise with the system tech and see what they have to offer, and then make a decision on whether I feed off an aux to a matrix or whether I just, matrix directly off of an output or whatever. So for me, I just am mentally prepared to be adaptable with my show files, and then defer to what is suggested and what the space dictates.
Yeah, adaptability is important for sure. For me, it's really just about having consistency. Like I want to pick something and then do it every time. So as far as outputs, I'm doing left right. I'm doing left right on a matrix. I'm doing front on a matrix, front fill on a matrix, and then hopefully they don't have too much after that. But there's always enough slots on my show files to just be able to like top something out in terms of sending the mix out where it needs to go. I don't do subs on an aux, just to engineers, and it's subs on a matrix have just worked really well for me for a long time. So it's in festival situations, I think it's even more important to do subs on a matrix. It's really just like the safest way to just, if you're not using the same rig, like I understand if you have your whole rig consistent, but if you're going from different rigs day to day, just send them a matrix. It'll just make your life easier. And I think some people on this group could probably explain why better than I can, but that's how I do it.
Yeah, and I guess so on the system end of things, Freyja and Tori and Ayumi, how do you like? Are you typically running subs separately, like in their own mono feed, or it's very system dependent. So that's a bit of an open-ended question.
Yeah, it's really system dependent. It completely depends what rig you have to work with. Anything that I've normally worked on would be left right subfill, but again, if you know your lake well enough, you can change it to whatever your front of path engineer requests within reason. But yeah, it's again with the communication, if you guys have a chat about it first. But it's actually really, really nice to know from Jade and Rena that front of house engineers are willing to be flexible in that. It's a good thing. Thank you. We appreciate that. I think everyone does. So yeah, we will work with whatever you guys need. I have seen it quite a few times where I felt like, oh, I've done you left, right, subfill. They're like, well, I don't want fills. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Just left, right, fine, okay, cool. You feel like an idiot figure. I've given you 4 and you only want 2, whatever. But again, as long as everyone's happy and you can accommodate them where you can, it's pretty chill.
Sure. And then I had one other question. Sorry, Max, while you're gone, I've just gone through a couple of questions on the Teams chat here. For the system engineers, how do you deal with drastically changing weather conditions between sound check and show?
That is a rude question.
Yeah, I know. We've had
that is such a good question right there. I love that question.
Controlling physics, stopping massive viruses from shutting down. Other than that, what can we do to do that?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
we could also not answer that because that is a very open-ended question.
Well, I have some suggestions.
How do you control the weather?
So for instance, like I've never done ACL with like LD systems, but I've been there with, like for other things. And one thing that they always have a huge issue with the ACL is the it's in Zilker Park in Austin, and there's a lot of different planes, and it's in a big open field. And Austin's or Texas weather changes drastically. Sometimes even the humidity changes drastically just throughout the day. Sometimes it stays, at a really good 70% humidity, and then it's just that way all the time. But apart from like really drastic weather, safety obviously is something that we have to consider in those situations. But if you're just speaking on terms of like, what do we do as far as like how acoustics are reacting to wind to air density to humidity and things like that. This kind of like, I guess this kind of goes back to just like understanding the basics of how your PA is going to react in those situations. What are its like the baseline curves that come with your PA, and then understanding how humidity and wind affect dispersion, affect just what frequencies are going to show up and be more present or be more thinned out. And then just using your ears, because you can't have like a triage of reference mics set up in the audience, you know, throughout the whole day. And you're not gonna, like, even if they're wireless, you're not gonna have somebody run out there and, you know, boop, 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 like throughout the day. That's unrealistic. And so a lot of times, you know, if you're the systems engineer, you understand how these environmental factors, especially in an outdoor situation, will affect your PA throughout the day. And again, it changes, temperature changes, humidity changes.
And
then
communicating
you
that
can
back to the touring engineers too is a big part of it. Again, you know the weather in your
Oh, yes.
district, right? So.
Absolutely. And so, you know, just understanding what you can do to manipulate that with your system without having to like really mess with the mechanics of it. Obviously, like, you're not going to go up there and be like, okay, I'm going to bump the whole PA and tilt it, you know, up you know, several degrees in the middle of the show. But understanding what your capabilities are with minimal disruption to the show, and how the environmental factors are going to react to those changes. And yeah, just doing what you can and communicating that, you know, to the front of house engineer. I'm sure, like, engineers, I've had it happen to me, they come up and they're like, oh, it sounds different now. You know, I was here earlier this morning, you know, when we were sound checking, and now it's nighttime and we're playing later on in the day, and you know, it sounds different. But yeah, you know, relying on your ears to tell you, you know, this is what I'm hearing, and understanding how acoustics are being affected, and how you then manipulate it with your tools.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that, like, the classic one I found, not personally working myself, but from being there and seeing it, is at Hollywood Bowl when the sun goes down. And you've done your sound checks for the day, and like everything's amazing, the PA sounds incredible everywhere, and then the sun goes down, it gets a bit colder and the humidity dies out, and you're like, oh, what? So I think, like, some friends I know who've been there and done that have like the pre-sundown file and the post-sundown file, so they know, like, okay, we're just gonna whack this filters in, this is what we need for this. But, like, being prepared, and then just experience as well. You gotta get out there and see why and how it sounds different. And it's kind of the same thing as when you sound check an empty arena and you're like, whoa, and then you get people and you're like, oh, okay, that's nice, you know, that kind of thing. So just experience as well.
Yeah, which is good, because it kind of leads me in kind of flip-flopping between questions here a little bit, because it goes back now to that same kind of moving back to mixing. And someone's asking, you know, if you're traveling with your own desk, what are you doing to make sure that mix translates between, you know, the 200-person club to the 200,000 person festival? Like, so what are you guys doing in your files to make sure that translates again from the festival to the club, vice versa, if you're doing that kind of tour?
I have, on some tours, gotten to the point where I've stored different files entirely for different environments, because I am such a hands-on and very subconscious mixer, that I'm really manipulating all the instruments to the space, depending on the act and you know, what I'm dealing with. But I'm doing a lot of changes based on the day and the vibe and whatever. And the vibe of a giant festival is so different than a 1,500 cap venue. And so I do sort of keep a base file of, well, this one was a great large event file, and I'll call that one up to start with, or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, I certainly have a similar approach. I do not use venue show files for festival show files, because I just feel like it's a totally different can of worms. And a lot of times when it's like throw and go, and you know, you short change over, you're in and out, like you
you're not going to have time to tailor your show file. So it's got to be as close as possible. You've got to remember that whatever recent outdoor show or, festival scenario you've done, that's as close as it is to this current one. And, like I think this is like a Dave Rat thing, but he was like, write down all your head amp games on everything and like memorize that, because no matter where you go, you're going to know that like your artists, like all the proportions of like where everything kind of needs to be, like the ballpark, get that down, because there's nothing worse than the first song hits and kick or snares like way too loud or even way too low, or you just got to get it close. So I really try to spend a lot of time on going through my files and making sure there's nothing off, making sure, like just the stuff that sounds bad through like a giant PA, like are my effects returns like in check, like really got to be sensitive about every little part of it. There's stuff that I've left out before, like I've had shows where I forgot to check I had like a flawless show file, but I forgot to check, the API on my left, right, out, that I had that threshold down a lot more than I did for the last show. And, oh, why is the whole PA crackling now? Like, what is this? Like it can go bad so fast if you don't check all that stuff. So, when it comes to show files, I try to use the closest one to what situation I'm given and as I can.
Cool. We got some questions. I'm back. Fuck you, internet. What are some of your favorite tools in your kit? Goes out to everybody.
A Leatherman and a torch. And someone asked me this the other day, and this is actually a really good one. I don't have any examples on my desk. As a monitor engineer, the interdental brushes that you get for teeth are really good for cleaning out ears. If in addition to the vacuums and everything, get them.
I'm going to jump in and say I bring an AeroPress everywhere, especially when I'm showing up to actually do more, showing up as an Adamson employee and showing up to, hang out really.
Me too.
I've started bringing a stainless steel French press as well, because sometimes like 5 people want a cup of coffee and doing 5 AeroPresses is like, I don't have 45 minutes, right? So
I got yelled at on the Who for making noise until they figured out that I was grinding coffee, and then it was deemed okay for the grinding of the coffee.
I always carry like a stack of no drink signs in my backpack. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a fun one because, definitely Leatherman, definitely torch, but my no drink signs have really saved my gear in the past.
So we've got baristas in the future here.
I need to get one. When we go back to work, the first thing I'm doing is getting one of those Lel Pelicans with laser cut out for like a tiny French press. That's what I'm doing. But this is the practical tool. I'm sorry, but I wish I had a fun one. One that has like saved my life more than once I have a Cat 5 crimper. And like extra connectors, like Cat 6, Cat 5, for when your connections don't want to work, because you always have kind of like a backup of like your little Ethernet cables, in like a drive rack drawer or something like that. But eventually, they can be finicky and delicate, and it's good that you can just be like, okay, like we don't have to, send a runner out right now. Like give me 5 minutes and you're all good.
I would say as well, get yourself a decent multimeter. Cannot stress this enough. If you are out on the road, it doesn't matter whose kit you're taking, you don't really want it to get blown up if something dodgy has happened with your distro. So I do make a point now of having my multimeter with me on every gig, and I will meter the power. I know it looks ridiculous, but I don't care. I'd rather look silly with my little prongs than have my kit blow up. So yeah, that and a cable stripper. They're lifesavers too.
I'm gonna just go ahead and reinforce the meter. It's not silly. I check it every time too. It doesn't matter, you know. That is
right.
Yeah, and I have like a little like I mean, for the US, I have like a little Edison gopher that will tell me like if the circuit's working or what's going on in the circuit if it's not. So I'll try that first. And I've definitely caught things, you know, like I had somebody was getting shocked one time, like from a guest rack that had come in, and it was all being powered. It was just like the IEMs there. I think it was like an S16, and it was a small rig, but you know, immediately I was like, can I power this down? And I unplugged it, and the ground pin was missing from their Edison plug. And I was like, probably. Why? Because they were like, your power's messed up, your power's messed up. I'm like, might be here.
We have another question too. Have you ever had a major sound issue just before a show, and how did you deal with it? What was your worst case scenario?
Only before, not during.
Well, we can go during too. Let's expand it. Yeah.
I mean, many times, right? Like there have been major sound issues before and during shows. It's funny, I'm sitting here in my apartment office in front of my desk where I have a little sign that a venue system tech made for me that says the Grace Under Pressure Award. I'm going to show it to you because it's so funny. Because the console died right before the show, and he figured out how to get it going again. And we ran the first 4 songs, and then it died middle of the 4th song, and people are turning around and yelling at me going, turn it on, turn it on. And I just was like, sorry, you know, what can we do? And we turned it on again, and we kept going. But at the end, they gave me that award, and I don't know. There's so many stories like that of stressful moments that we've all had to keep rolling with. You just have to roll with it.
Yeah, mine was definitely the one I mentioned before about, you know, user error. Like I didn't check my plugins on my master left, right, and they were just smashing the whole mix down. But of course, I was yelling at every festival, you know, sys engineer, like everyone, go look into it, go radio the stage. You know, it's not me, it's not me. Like, and that I learned a big lesson. You know, I don't always assume like you think you know what it is, and it sounds obvious, but a lot of times, like the real problem is not what you're immediately thinking. So, but yeah, it was awful. I'm talking like a sea of people like are glaring as like the whole first song just sounds smashed to bits, glaring at you. It's just not a good feeling. So the good thing is, you know, once that kind of thing happens, you make sure it never happens again. So
I have 2 quick ones.
Oh my God, sorry.
Oh no, sorry, you can go first.
I was gonna say I've not had one like pre-show yet. It probably will happen, and I'll probably cry about it and then laugh about it. But when you get like quite closely involved with the band and production, everyone, and you're like a little family, the minute something goes wrong, you feel your heart in your throat because you're like, oh God, no, not just because, oh God, someone screwed up, just because I hate that this is happening. And that's like, oh, it takes a while to come back from that. But I've had Victoria, you probably found this as well, like when you're flying PA, like I spent all of last summer flying like some big touring rigs, and we'd obviously like always check them before we fly them. And it's that one that's been outside and it's got a bit wet in the connector. So you go on up the back in your little harness and like nothing's happening and you're like, thank God the show's tomorrow. But it's still really disheartening because it's like you worked so hard and you've got this entire rig up and it's just like this one box and it's always at the top. So you got to climb all the way up there and try and fix it like that. Oh man. But what I would say though is when these things do happen, stuff does break, and sometimes you just can't help it. And like trying to get your mindset away from that is really important, because show must go on, and you can't beat yourself up over shit happening. It just happens. So sometimes.
Oh man, that's so true. Like, yeah, shit just happens. And you know, especially as the systems person, if it's happening on your side, I mean, it's your responsibility to stay level-headed and fix the problem, because you only have two options, truly one, but the two options are the show's going to happen or it's not going to happen. And I think, you know, we would all prefer that it happens. And so like keeping that level-headedness and trying to, you know, troubleshoot as safely and as quickly as you can. So yeah, my first one was a pre-show one, and Jeremiah was there, so he remembers this too. We were in Detroit, and it was an outdoor shed. It was a shed, and there we got the PA in the air, and immediately, like we hadn't even turned the system on yet. We got a weather warning for a severe storm, so we kind of locked everything down. I think we brought the PA down to rest, like on top of the subs, because we had the subs on left-right blocks. And after the storm, the power went out and to the whole venue, and we didn't get power for, I think it was 3.5 hours. And then the power came back on right before doors, and they decided that show's happening. We haven't heard the system. We haven't powered anything on. Luckily, when the surge happened, nothing got damaged, so everything turned on the right way. We had already run into some other technical issues that day, so we were troubleshooting that as well. Like right before, like people were coming in, you know, so the opener played, and then they ended up canceling the show. It's the only show that artist has ever canceled, because another storm was coming, and then we lost power again. And we had to wait for it for a very long time to be able to bring in the PA, and everybody, you know, is moody, you're tired, you're wet, because, you know, it was high winds. And so we had to wait, and poor Jeremiah had driven in from Canada to, you know, Detroit to do the show, and the poor man had to do an 8-hour drive there and an 8-hour drive home the same day after that incident. And then the other one, it was actually the same tour, and we had a catastrophic failure on the SD10 at front of house with no backup, like on our package. So we had to have somebody drive one. Now I'm like forgetting where we were. I think we had to do like a whole like triage of like different transitions, because it happened the first time in Cleveland, and so we brought in another power source for it, and then the backup stopped working, and it was actually, I don't even remember, I ended up on the phone with Digico trying to like troubleshoot it, and then they called me back and they're like, yeah, you need to get a new console, it's catastrophic failure. And I think we were in Madison, Wisconsin, and they had to drive in an SD10. We swapped it after the opener, before the headliner, and then had to like, and that was front of house's call on that. He was very adamant that that was the decision that we were going to make. And so we swapped it. I got everything into the drive rack. The only thing that we couldn't make work was a different monitor came with it. And so the screen size was different. And I think it was like partially inverted, and we just ran out of time. You know, that was kind of the last thing on our list of things to check before the show went on, but the show happened. It was fine. We got a replacement console sent out, and the rest, you know, the rest is good after that. But those were two like very close together shows where there were issues that we had to fix, you know, during and before.
Meegan,
Show happened.
For us?
I think ultimately, if you're not ready for something to go wrong, then you probably shouldn't be doing live events, because everything has the potential to fail at any time. And truly, it is not about the failure, it's about how you recover. So how well do you have a workaround? Many engineers that I know, front of house and monitors have backup mixes for each other. It's a default. If one of the consoles goes down, you still have a show. And there have been times when major rock shows have been mixed from monitors. We've had problems with consoles where you can't get the console to come back, and that front of house mix is dialed up from monitor world. I think, I mean, I could write a whole novel on the shows I've been on and the things that have been a problem. And some of it is technology driven, some of it is human driven. We make mistakes, we're tired, we work long hours, sleep on a tour bus, don't sleep well, because drugs and alcohol. Honestly, like there's a lot of factors that make mistakes happen and make failures happen. And like I said, how you come out of it, how you recover, and a lot of that is understanding the equipment that you've got, whether you're a technician or an engineer, really knowing some of the pitfalls and some of the issues that happens with this particular console or with this gear, some of the things that are glitchy. It's up to you to keep up to date on those things and read the forums and see how people are struggling, you know. There are certain manufacturers, they're very excited about their products. They put them out maybe a little too early. You know, look at iPhone, you know, look at how excited they are, and they let us all do their R&D. Same thing in our industry. People want to put their product out and not always is it ready. And so they let the group of us figure out problems. And then for us, we have to figure out the solutions when there are those problems. So, yeah. And so many things have gone wrong on shows I've done.
Just
I don't like talking about it.
To further what you said, a point in my career where I became a lot more comfortable in the job was when I accepted my role as more of a problem solver than anything else. I've always, working in the studio initially, felt like I was fighting to get to this level where everything was going to work. And the day that I was like, no, that's not my job. My job is just to keep it working and make it work as best as it can at any given time. And I've always kept that with me, that I'm first and foremost a problem solver, and that's it, because there will be problems, and that's the only way to get through the day.
That's great advice. Thank you for that, Rena. We're coming up on time here. Thank you so much to all 6 of you for joining me today. It's been really a great conversation. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope that our audience has as well. I think for me, that's the best part of the quarantine right now, is there's so many good webinars and sessions on the internet available for free. So if you want to further your knowledge, whether it be monitor mixing, front of house mixing, system engineering, really so many of the manufacturers and mixers are putting out these incredible webinars. And I will shout out Adamson here. Their training is available for free on their website if you want to learn more about PA systems that they make and how to fly them. So I'll pass it over to Jeremiah for a nice little outro, and thank you so much to our panelists today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for hosting, Max.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this. It's been a lot of fun and really informative. I've had a chance to cross paths with absolutely everyone in this call in some way or another, and have been long-lasting experiences like we've kind of been talking about. Yeah, so just the little plug that Max is kind of leading up to there. We do have a lot of our training material has been put into webinar form, and this is what, the 21st or 22nd episode, and there's 20 episodes before this that have quite a range of information. And we're also doing some private online certification courses as well, so keep an eye out for that, and we'll be posting that on the education section of our website. That's really all I got to say. I've had a lot of fun, and it's good to see some really familiar faces that I miss. So I think we'll kind of wrap it up there, and thanks a lot. And there'll be more content coming next Tuesday and Thursday, so stay tuned for those announcements coming up. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
Bye.